Hello everybody and welcome to the next episode of our How to Win series for Arkham Horror. Today we're going to be talking about understanding evaluation. This is a pretty tricky topic to kind of like break down and how to understand and how to evaluate evaluation. But, I think Travis did a great job, and we have a guy that'll hopefully help you understand how things constantly shift in this game and how you can best approach doing the best with the constantly shifting stuff and determining what you need to do to win. So, when it comes to evaluation, there are two important questions to ask yourself, and that is, how do I win and how do I lose? The questions are kind of easy to know what it means. So how do I win? Getting clues, beating enemies, bosses, and achieving the goal of the scenario. So if the goal on the current act says get 6 clues, you win by getting 6 clues, defeating threats that show up, and then continuing that for the rest of the scenario. The kind of harder question to understand in its full is, how do I lose? Because running out of time and having Doom go on the agenda to the point where it advances and then you lose is the obvious one for how you lose. Not killing enemies is also another easy way to see how you lose. But another thing to be aware of is you also lose by having a lack of cards, damage, sanity, and resources. The cards and the resources are especially kind of a weird thing to understand why it's important to have those, or else you will lose when you're just starting out. Because if you need to use cards to deal with the threats that show up, or to ensure that you can get clues and all of that jazz, you're gonna fall behind and lose because of that. Did either of you guys wanted to add anything to these ideas here?
I think that covers it pretty well.
Cool.
It is when you ask yourselves, or when you're asking yourself which of these questions is also important. Generally, the further behind you are in the game is when you should be asked. The more likely you should be asking yourself, "How do I win?" Mm-hmm. Because the further you're behind, then the more ways there are for you to lose, and you can't fend them all off. So you should be trying to play to your outs and come up with a path to victory. Whereas when you're ahead of the game and assuming if everything continues the way it has, that you'll win, then you need to be focusing on what could happen that will set me far enough behind to lose.
Yeah.
And do your best to mitigate those without giving up the advantages that you've accrued.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where especially the idea of card advantage and resource advantage comes in. If you're ahead, you're going to probably lose if you fall too behind and just in those aspects of the game. And that's where asking yourself how you lose when you are ahead is very important while you're playing this game. Answering these questions, of course, requires a lot of evaluation and understanding your priorities. This is where the understanding evaluation comes in. To better showcase this and all of the areas of the game that you should look at each turn, we're going to talk about them one by one with a few examples. And so how it's going to work is I'll just kind of read the slide to you, the viewers, and then the three of us will kind of just have an open discussion for other things that aren't included here and also some of the examples included here. So the first area that Travis and I both agreed, maybe Bryn does too, we haven't asked him, but he can tell us now, is the area that you should examine first on your turn is your threat area. This is because it's your threat area. The name is perfect. It is a threat to you for the cards that are there. Commonly, it's the most important area to evaluate first each turn. In your threat area, you can have enemies, treacheries, and weaknesses. You should evaluate how deadly each of the cards in your threat area is to you and your success in the scenario. So Travis, what does that mean?
Well, certain cards are going to be more impactful for you than others are. Where if you're engaged with a monster, if you try to do things that aren't fight the monster or evade it, to deal with it in some manner, it is going to kill you eventually. Mm-hmm. So that's usually pretty high on the list. Evaluating how much damage monsters deal to you and how easy they are to kill as well, how many actions they'll take is also important. Where, for example, say you're engaged with 2 of these ghoul minions we got on the screen and some big health guy who hits you for 2 hearts and 2 brains instead.
Mm-hmm.
He's got like 10 health or something. You're in a bad place. You got a weapon that deals 2 damage, and like sure you can spend your 3 actions chopping up the big guy for 6 health and then for 6 damage, and then take 4 hearts and 4 brains on your turn, or you could just spend 2 actions killing the little baby ghoul minions, and then maybe getting the big guy for another 2 points, and then which leaves the big guy still alive, obviously, which he would be in the first scenario anyway. But you're also only taking 2 hearts and 2 brains now, because the other 2 ghoul minions are dead.
Yeah.
Other cards that other things to consider are like treacheries, like Bedeviled on the screen. Sometimes it's going to be in play, and your priorities aren't activating the action abilities on cards you control. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you draw this card and you're like, that's cool, I was going to spend all 3 actions this turn and next turn investigating.
Yeah.
Or moving. Like, it's just not something you need to think about.
Yes. If you've watched us play, you'll see a lot of the time when we draw treachery cards, one of us will just be like, well, I'm just this card's keeper now.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
this doesn't do anything to me, so I don't need to spend any resources solving it. Other times you draw it and you're like, well, I need to get that out of here yesterday, so I can't play the game while it's here.
Yeah, and I think the biggest, it's when you're first starting out, it's kind of hard to know what cards are bad and which cards aren't for you. It's one of those things that, like, as you are learning and examining each of these treachery cards when they're in your threat area, you'll better understand that, as well as understanding, like, just your general deck property. Because maybe, like, there are probably some investigators or some decks you can build, and then you look at Bedeviled and you're like, this is not anything that I'll ever have to worry about, right? But when you're first starting, it's probably pretty scary when you get any treachery in your threat area. But evaluating how deadly that treachery is a big part to know how to win this game.
There's even another level of evaluating your treacheries like Bedeviled, where even if it's not impactful to you, is it worth an action to try and get rid of because it's a dead draw for you in the future if you're going to shuffle the Mythos decks back soon, or if you're early in the scenario? Or is it better to keep it because it's actually just crippling for one of your teammates to draw it, and it's more likely, if you put it back, then they're more likely to draw it. So you're better off keeping it and living with a small restriction.
Definitely.
The last card type. Card type that finds when your threat area is your weaknesses. We have self-destruct on screen here because it's one of the most polarizing weaknesses. Where if you're an investigator, this card, it might as well not exist. It just kills your draw for the turn. You keep it in your threat area, and you never deal damage to enemies. So who cares? It's a lot more threatening when you are the damage dealer, though, and
it's a
dealing 1 damage.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's like a solve now issue, especially if you're with a monster. You ask your teammates to be like, "Hey, can one of you guys come and maybe get rid of this?" Right? If you need to
get one of your teammates to take care of it, or if you're engaged with a big monster, sometimes it's worth evaluating. If I'm gonna have to pump 6 or 7 attacks into this guy to kill him, there's no way I can survive 6 or 7 damage from my self-destructive if I'm unable to evade him for whatever reason. Maybe it's worth just taking the attack of opportunity to get rid of it.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of weaknesses that kind of will through this as well. A big example of ones that you see in our playthroughs a lot are Bryn bleeding to death, from his internal injury, the ones that will deal damage to each turn. That's one that's also really easy for when you get to understand how to evaluate, because you can be like, all right, I'm not gonna let this slow me down this turn. I can still go with my plan, but you don't want to do that every turn. You're eventually going to want to stop bleeding to death in front of everyone around you.
I mean,
but sometimes you're like, we're playing. This is going to kill me in 5 turns. We're playing to win the game in 3 turns. I just ignore it. Who cares?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
If things go wrong enough that we can't win within those 3 turns, maybe this isn't going to be as big of a problem as other things are.
Yeah. Shall I go on to the next one? Are we good?
I think so.
Cool.
I am.
Doom in play. Each round, always keep an eye on the Doom in play and ask yourself the following questions. Is there Doom on the board you can get rid of? If you can remove Doom from the board, do you need to do it right now? And are there ancient evils in the Mythos deck? Before we get into handing this over to Travis to kind of break these down further, one thing to also, my biggest advice, this is something I've started doing since we've been recording lately, because I get brain flooded while trying to like record, play, tell jokes, yada, yada, yada. And the most helpful thing I've done is at the start of each round for myself is I say how much Doom is in play and how much is on the Mythos deck, and on the agenda on the agenda card, and then how much we need to go through. So like I'll say there's 5 Doom on the board, 2 on the agenda, we advance at 7. And it's just a good thing, a good habit to get into each round, because not only does it remind you to put Doom in play, but it'll make you better understand what your timing is for the game. Travis, I'll let you take this away.
Okay. So, Doom, not go too in-depth into this, but it's basically how the game races you. If you want more in-depth explanation, go watch our Understanding Tempo video, but so the first thing you're going to consider is there Doom on the board you can get rid of, because getting rid of Doom just basically buys you more turns, right? If you leave an Acolyte and play with 1 Doom on it, then that's 1 less turn that you and your team have to play the game with. Getting rid of these is more valuable the more people there are, because taking away each round that the game takes away from you takes away more actions. If you're playing solo and there's an Acolyte in play, it takes you 3 actions to move over and get rid of it, then it's kind of like, who cares? Because it takes away 3 actions from you anyway.
Yeah, unless you want it to be where he is.
Yeah, unless that's someplace you need to be. It's a good point. But if you're playing with 4 people, then all of a sudden these 3 actions buy your team 12 actions, which is a lot more than 3.
Hold on, can we get someone to do the math on that?
Yeah, let's get some understanding math in here just to be sure.
Yeah, someone double check for me. Yeah, they need to evaluate whether that Doom needs to be removed now, or if you can wait until it's more convenient. So again, like maybe the Acolyte's a little bit out of the way, but the agenda is it's on 6 of 7 anyway, so the Doom on the Acolyte doesn't matter. Or maybe you're engaged with your Clover is engaged with another enemy, and you've got like 3 of 7 Doom. Like that Acolyte can wait a turn too. It's not an issue.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing with Spires of Carcosa. Like, 2 Doom is a lot, and you need to evaluate whether it's more valuable to you to try and get those away now, or if you can sort of work your way over there, like move to if it's 2 locations away, do you need to move over twice and get rid of one this turn, or can you move into the next location, investigate, or do something else twice and then deal with it the turn after?
Yeah, definitely.
And then the last consideration is always, are there ancient evils in the Mythos deck? Because you don't want to just get blown out by them. Where you're like, oh yeah, we have 5 Acolyte can wait a turn, then one of your teammates draws ancient evils, and all of a sudden you're like,
Double ancient evils, you'd say.
Yeah. And that's even more important, as what Travis was saying, like with the more players you have. Like the more players you have, if there's ancient evil in the Mythos deck, the more likely you are to draw them, and the harder they'll hit you when you do draw them. Yeah.
And this is the part where I would say that communication is important if you're trying to win, but thematically, you can't tell your teammates if you have war protection in your hand. You're not supposed to.
You're not supposed to. But you could just tell by the glimmer in their eye, just that hopeful optimism that everything's going to be okay.
I have to kill that Acolyte this turn. Then you're like, no, you don't.
Yeah. Worry not. All right. The next one is a bit strange, which is locations in play. Sometimes your location may also offer a point of evaluation. If I stay here, will an enemy with Hunter move into my location and attack me? That's not good if you don't want to get attacked, but also sometimes it is good if you're the goon, because you could just do an action doing something else. If you're not too worried about the guy moving in and dealing minimal damage to you, you can just take the damage and basically just have the guy come to you. That's nice. That's a good thing. But if you are the fragile Clover who doesn't want to get hit, maybe move out of that location. Maybe that is important for you to answer and ask for yourself each turn. Are there any effects or treacheries attached to my location that will hurt me if I stay at this location this turn? This is very noticeable in a few campaigns where there is perchance a hole in the ground or poisonous mushrooms that explode. This one isn't too common, and it'll be pretty obvious when it does happen, but it is something you are going to want to ask yourself when you're examining your location as well. As the fighter, should I move to another location to be closer to my allies that may need my help if they draw an enemy? If you don't have a monster engage with you and you're doing nothing, rather than just staying like 3 locations away from your ally who is like, just trying to grab clues, maybe move closer so you're not like you just draw cards and then they draw an enemy and you're like, okay, I can get there next turn, but that's about it. And then the last one, another thing to consider is I just evaded an enemy. Should I leave my location to avoid that enemy readying and engaging me again? If you don't want to fight that enemy and it doesn't have Hunter and you evaded that enemy and there is nothing else on your location of value, GTFO. There's really like rarely a reason to stay there in that case. If you're planning on killing that enemy, obviously stay on that location and you just wanted to like buy your time to play a weapon. But if you evaded with this purpose of getting away, maybe you should look at the board state and say, hey, I should get away. Any other thoughts from you guys?
The only one I really have is about like the fighter positioning, where positioning in general is like a lot more important than it seems at the surface. Again, like Justin mentioned, like you need to evaluate that. Is it better for me to just sit here and spend 3 actions, gain 3 resources this turn, or move close to my allies? Because being one location away from your clue getter who needs help is the difference between moving in and watching them get beat down by the monster anyway, or like moving in and killing the monster. That's you have to plan things out a little bit.
Yeah, and likewise, this responsibility doesn't just fall on the fighter. As your clover, you shouldn't just like put your hands up in the air and run away from the fighter if like there's a location near you, closer to the fighter, that also has clues that you can get. Of course, there's always times where everything changes in this game, but generally you don't want to make your fighter do all the work to keep you safe. You want to work as a team because this is a co-op game and you'll succeed more if you're working together. Opportunity costs. This is a fun one. I like this slide and I'm excited to discuss it and talk to it about for you guys watching this video who might not understand the importance of these kind of decisions. So, you may need to evaluate situational moments to determine what the best opportunity cost is to take. Before we go into this example in detail, Travis, do you want to just kind of explain what opportunity costs generally mean, just quickly, for the viewers?
So like opportunity cost is the cost, what you're giving up to do something, basically. Cool. So if you are investigating to get a clue for your turn, you have to evaluate. Usually these evaluations are pretty simple, where getting a clue is generally more valuable than gaining a resource or drawing a card or moving to a new location, because you need clues to win the game. It's one of your objectives. But other opportunity costs are more complicated, such as committing a card like working a hunch. Is this +2 book to this test more valuable than just getting a clue later, even though I need to have 2 resources to do it?
Yeah. You
need to take into consideration about how many am I going to need those resources for something else? Do I need this clue this turn, or can I have it later?
And we're going to be touching on this in greater detail at the end of the video. So we're going to kind of be putting a lot of these things together for an example when we get to the end. We have our 3 good friends here. Bryn is playing Mark Harrigan, Travis is playing Rex Murphy, and I'm playing Ashcan Pete. And Rex and Mark, as you can see, are each engaged with an enemy at different locations. Should Ashcan move to deal with Rex's enemy, or should he move to deal with Mark's enemy, allowing Mark to move to help Rex with his? Or alternatively, should Ashcan Pete just grab resources and draw cards? This is a small little example of a decision that a player will need to make in the game. Do either of you guys want to give your thoughts?
Sorry, this is an example of an absolute versus comparative advantage, where Mark is going to be able to kill that ghoul no problem. Super easy. But Ashcan Pete, he might not actually be able to kill the other ghoul because he's testing only 4 to 3 without something to bump him up, whereas Mark is to test 5 to So if Pete goes and deals with the crappy ghoul that Mark is engaged with, then that allows Mark to go deal with the scarier ghoul more consistently that Rex is engaged with.
Yeah.
So in this case, Mark has an absolute advantage in dealing with these ghouls because he's just better at it all the time. Assuming, of course, he's got a weapon that deals multiple damage in play, which, like, why wouldn't you? Well, if you're not doing your job if you don't.
Yeah. And
whereas, like, Pete has the comparative advantage here.
Yeah. And, like, you can say while you're looking at this, well, Ashcan can move in, grab the ghoul, bite the ghoul with Duke, and then Mark Harrigan could kill his own ghoul and then step over and attack the ravenous ghoul that Ashcan Pete's holding. But that really kind of just seems a little, like, to me, it seems a little less optimal. And the best way to win Arkham Horror is to find the most optimal route. Like, to me, the choice is simple. You go grab the ghoul from Mark, bite it, or even just, like, bite it and don't even just trust that Duke will hit it, right? Like, that's where he gets into the next thing of the opportunity cost. You want to take the risk of not even engaging the enemy. I probably, in this case, for simplicity, would probably just engage the enemy to ensure Mark can go help Rex, but...
well, you can always do that after you attack.
Exactly, yeah. Just assume you won't miss and grab it after. And that's like whenever we've talked about how this game's very hard because things constantly change. Like, there's a ton of different ways you could take this example, right? And sometimes in the moment, it's hard to know when you're just starting out what's best, but we'll revisit these guys later while their adventures continue. Tempo. Developing tempo. So I'll say right now, if you don't know what tempo is, as Travis said, check out the How to Win Understanding Tempo video we did, which you can find in the description down below. While evaluating, you may find chances that will allow you to develop tempo and get ahead of the game. You may not be always able to capitalize on these moments due to more pressing matters. However, you should always be looking for moments where you can get ahead. Yeah. It's just one of those things that sometimes you're going to have the luxury and the time to get ahead on the game, and finding those moments is a crucial part of evaluating the game. It's harder to understand without us diving deep into tempo, so we recommend checking out the Understanding Tempo video to kind of get an idea of what that is, if you don't know already. Next thing we got is restrictions. While evaluating, you should be aware of any restrictions you may have that prevent you from accomplishing certain things or that restrict you outright. Now, optimally, yes, this is something that you should do immediately. But with our order of the examples here, Frozen in Fear and Dissonant Voices would both be in your threat area. So, you would already have been aware of these issues. And unlike some of the ones we talked about earlier, Frozen in Fear and Dissonant Voices, you can't really do anything about when they're there. So just being aware of those restrictions will make it easier for you to evaluate certain things. Because now, for example, you're looking at the look what I found in your hand and the Dissonant Voices in play, and then your brain can just be like, I'm going to completely forget that this card exists for its text box this turn. Other few cases, your locations might also restrict you from doing things. Apparently, while I was looking and making these slides, there's only 6 locations that do this, so it's actually not too common. You'll find it more in your threat area or from scenario effects. Anything you guys want to add here?
Yeah, this one's less about being its own consideration, and it's something that kind of gets tacked on to all the previous ones.
Yeah.
Where you look at your threats and you're like, okay, I need to kill this monster. It's going to kill me. Do I have anything that's preventing me from doing that?
Yeah.
Oh, I need to get the clues. Is there anything that's going to stand in my way while I'm doing that? And you get the doom off this Spires Carcosa or something that's going to make that more difficult.
Definitely, yeah. It's just kind of, restrictions are always there. So just kind of like when you're asking all the previous areas you're looking, just be aware of the restrictions that might stop you as well. After evaluating what you need to do, you need to ask yourself what tools you have available to accomplish it. Some assets, like the 45 automatic here, have limited uses, and those uses should be evaluated. Is there a better use for its limited uses? So you only have 4 shots on your gun and you're Mark Harrigan. Do you want to use your gun on a swarm of rats that have 1 attack and 1 health? Probably not. Probably
I
not.
hope not.
Yeah. I also would not.
Yeah. Yeah, like, that would be not such a great choice. Unless you have something else that is making it very difficult for you to succeed at fight tests and you need that extra punch.
Yeah. Yeah. And then while events and skills usually only have one use because you can recur them and all the amazing tricks you can do in this game now that are different from when it was just the core set. It is still, however, very important to evaluate the best use of that event and skill. This will come up a lot with Ward of Protection when you are going to draw a card and be like, this is bad, but is Ancient Evils in the Mythos deck? Because if Ancient Evils is in the Mythos deck and there are 2 other players, so we would lose 9 actions, Ward of Protection is probably better used for something like that, assuming that,
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think it is also important with these single-use cards to not focus on the best possible use, but merely one that is good enough right now.
Wow, Bryn, did you read our slides and know what the next slide was?
Sort of.
Yeah.
But yeah,
As we were talking before, have any of you guys ever played Final Fantasy and you've just never used your Phoenix Downs because they're too good to use? Well, in Arkham Horror, the card game, you should not fall into the trap of something being too good to use. Sometimes the most efficient option is the one that seems lower value. So, not like using a lightning gun on a rat, which has 1 attack. We have a situation here where Mark Harrigan has 1 shot left on his super cool lightning gun, and he's engaged with a Wizard of the Order that has 4 attack and 2 doom on it. Killing it is imperative because doom is the agenda is going to tick over. It's not there in the example, but just trust me, I've seen the board state. In this situation, you got to ask yourself, is it better for Mark to use his lightning gun for 1 test at 10-4, or fight the enemy with 2 tests at 5-4? Now with the lightning gun, this guy only has 2 health, so you lose 1 damage, you lose 1 value on this. But it's just better in this case to just zap this guy with the lightning gun.
Yeah.
It's just...
Yeah, that's one that is good enough right now. I actually didn't know this slide was coming up next. This is just a trap that I fall into all the time. Where I end the game and I've got like 6 awesome cards in my hand and I'm like, why didn't I use these for something?
Yeah. Well, Travis and I were working these slides, and he brought up a point here where this is a pretty obvious example. Even if the Wizard of the Order had no doom on it, it's probably still worth the lightning gun here, because it just neutralizes the threat at 1 test where you have an insane advantage. If this wasn't a Wizard of the Order, it was just a tough enemy that had 4 attack and wasn't putting doom in play. If you didn't have another weapon on standby, you could probably fight your way through it. But if you had another weapon that you were ready to put into play, just zap this guy with the lightning gun and then get a new weapon out. That's another one of those things where the situations are always changing, but something being too good to use is something that we all, a lot of people fall into, right? So just don't always worry about it. Everything doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, right? Travis, you want to talk a bit about this?
No, I think you guys pretty much nailed it.
Perfect. All right, let's get to this. All right, so we have a board state here that we're gonna kind of break down and kind of discuss about all the potential things that these characters can do with what's in their hand, and we're going to evaluate what's best. So, as you can see, Mark, Ashcan Pete, and Rex have been having an exciting game of the Midnight Masks. This is the 2nd scenario in the core set if you don't know that. You probably do because you probably have the core set. Let's examine this board and then dive deeper into this example. So, no one has any cards. Mark Harrigan has the Wizard of the Order in his threat area. Next, if we look at Doom, there is 7 Doom in play and 2 of it is able to be removed. If you do not remove any Doom, the agenda will advance, and then your scenario is over. So just to be aware of. There are 3 cultists left that can be spawned. 1 on the north side, 1 at St. Mary's Hospital, and 1 at downtown. Mark can get to north side and St. Mary's Hospital. So there is a 66% chance that the cultist you spawn is really good. As you can see, there are 3 clues on the south side location, but if Rex gets those clues, he'll have enough to spawn the cultist, the masked cultist that could appear. Is there anything else of importance that I've missed here?
While there are cards remaining in the investigator's decks, none of them, they might as well be blank.
Yeah.
So Rex could take attacks of opportunity from the Wizard of the Order to draw cards, but they're not going to do anything for him. Duke can, or Ash Campete can draw cards off his deck to use Duke again if he chooses, but it's just a blank card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so let's just kind of break down each of these guys individually with a few options they have, just like what they're generally thinking with the cards they have available to them. So Mark is engaged with a Wizard of the Order, and he has a 45 automatic in play with, we'll just say, enough ammo to kill this Wizard of the Order if he spends all 3 actions doing it. He has a 45 automatic in play and a vicious blow in hand. He is wondering if he should use only the weapon, only the skill card, or both to attack this Wizard of the Order. How would you guys generally evaluate this decision? And this is before we
Mark's got 5. Assuming you're playing on standard, Mark's got 5 punch, 6 with the gun, and the 2 damage is enough to kill the Wizard of the Order. So that's a pretty easy decision, I think. Especially if he has some things to consider are, I know the cards in their decks are functionally blank, but maybe if he does have a 45 automatic, he might consider using the 45 automatic, trying to draw, or in case he draws the second copy. But moreover, it's probably best for him to hold on to the vicious blow to deal with the cultist that potentially spawns in 1 action.
Yeah.
As opposed to simply getting +1 and wasting the extra damage from the vicious blow.
Yeah. Yeah. And all this is also the as we get to the big picture as well, especially once we get to Ashcan Pete's turn, it's going to really open up. But right now, if Mark is thinking, hey, I'm going to kill this Wizard of the Order, this is how I want to do it, I agree as well. It's pretty simple. Just you have the bullet on your gun and it gets you up 2. That's pretty passable.
It is a lot easier to replace a weapon than it is to replace a vicious blow, because you can only have 2 vicious blows in your deck.
Yeah.
You can have all kinds of different weapons in your deck.
And I mean, if we also look at the situation where you needed this Wizard of the Order to die, and you only had 1 shot left on your automatic, you miss with the you shoot with the automatic, you miss, you can then do it again with the vicious blow, right? Still up 2 and get the kill. I don't think using both is the right choice here, because there might be a -3 in the bag. It's only going to be 1 of the 16 chits, so only 2 of 16 are auto fails pretty much, right? It's just take the shot, Mark. Shoot with the gun. Next up, we got Rex. So, Rex is committing a deduction for an investigate action, and he's wondering if he should commit the crack the case in his hand, or, assuming he can get all the clues off this location, use it to gain resources. What do we think on this one?
I think the resources are pretty close to valueless this late into a scenario. You have maybe 2 more turns, assuming everything goes the way you want it to.
Yeah.
You might as well just throw it at the test to try and make sure that you grab all the clues in a single action instead of doing it otherwise.
I'm right there with you.
Yep, I agree. Getting the +1 to try and succeed by 2 or more for Rex's ability is more important than the
2 resources here.
Yeah.
Even if it was a Shroud of 3, it's still worth it to try to just, in my mind, exactly as Brent said, the resources are pretty useless this late for a character like Rex. He probably has his machine up and going. I mean, he has nothing in play, so let's just forget that. But it's much better at this point, to me, to use it to just ensure his ability triggers. Then you get 3 clues at once, and it feels great.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about our good friend, Ashcan Pete. So Ashcan Pete has no cards in hand, but as always, Duke is there to help him out. Ashcan Pete has a few choices that he can make on his turn. So we generally play 3 players. We know a lot of people don't play 3-player, but when you play 3-player a lot, you have the flex character, who is, their job is essentially evaluating the board state and finding the best thing to do. So let's talk about what Ashcan is thinking about all this. So Ashcan could use Duke to move into south side to try and get clues to help Rex out in ensuring a new masked cultist is spawned. What do we think of that idea?
That could be relevant if Rex pulls the auto fail and needs help getting those clues.
Yep. Another thing he can do is Ashcan can move into the Miskatonic University and have Duke chomp down on the Wizard of the Order, allowing Mark to fight something else, like the potential masked cultist that could show up by Rex spawning it. I think that is a pretty good choice that Duke could make. And then we got Ashcan could also go into the graveyard and let Duke have a slice of Acolyte for dinner. So both of these last two options deal with the Doom, one of the Doom situation. And as you can see, they only need, here, let's just get to this next little bit. The only thing they need to do then is remove one Doom in play. If they remove one Doom in play, they're fine because there's no Ancient Evils in the Midnight Mask scenario. And then they can clean up the remaining Doom or any other Doom that may show up once they have a whole other turn, which if they get rid of one Doom this turn, they will. Another further step in evaluation is something that we face a lot as 3 players, is figuring out the best order for players to take their turns. So let's formulate a plan for how to best handle this turn for these 3 investigators while evaluating everything that we have discussed so far. So, Travis and I made the joke already while we were doing this, Bryn, that Duke should just resign, so we don't need to make that joke here.
Are you sure? Everyone could resign.
Yeah, we could all just resign.
They could just all leave. They could just give up.
It is a choice.
I think at this point in the game, we would all agree that it is very possible for us to spawn and defeat one more cultist. So I think we would all stay and fight. I think, for me, Rex should go first here.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, if Rex goes first, you gain most info.
Yeah, whether you get spawn the cultist or not is pre-contingent on what the other 2 do, because if you don't get if Rex fails like all of his tests and gets no clues, there's no way that Duke's going to be able to get the extra ones. Then you can have Mark deal with the Wizard of the Order, and Duke Ashcan and Pete go deal with the Acolyte, and you free up yourselves an extra turn. But if he does get the clues, then you can look towards finishing off the cultist this turn.
So yeah. I'm also just looking to remind myself. 2 clues as a group. So even if Rex needed to take all of his time to get the clues, Ashcan could also still, whoever has a free action also could still spawn the cultist as well. That is also relevant to evaluating here as well for people who are wondering why I was looking that up. For me, I would, as a go, like Rex goes first, and I think then Ashcan goes second here. Because in my mind, I would say Ashcan goes second if the cultist that Rex can spawn, assuming he does, is spawned at a location Mark can get to. Because if that's the case, he then moves to Mark's location and grabs the Wizard of the Order to chomp down on. If he fails that, Mark could kill that guy before leaving. I think if the location... Oh, sorry, Travis.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
I think that if the cultist is spawned on downtown, Mark goes next. He kills his cultist and then begins to make his way up. And I think in that case, as Ashcan, you go and move to fight the guy in the graveyard. Just because then you can solve that Doom problem before it shows up again. And then in that case, let's say, for example, you draw another Acolyte from the Mythos deck or the card that spawns a cultist. You put it on the empty Rivertown location. Duke can just move back in and chop him again next turn. That seems pretty good.
It do seem pretty good.
I'm not a huge fan of having Pete try to kill the Wizard of the Order. To my mind, an even test is a waste of an action. For the most part, I would much rather try like up one against the the cultist in the graveyard, even though it is a less valuable enemy, because it is you have greater odds of hitting it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like at most he could be up one. He also could be up one on the Wizard of the Order if Mark wanted to use his Vicious Blow on that attack too, but that is a bit risky.
Yeah, I think it's better for Mark to just kill the wizard because he gets to do it up too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, if the cultist spawns in a place Mark can get to, Ash can also just walk in and just like
give the cultist a chomp, a little preliminary bite.
He could try to bite it. Yeah. He could also, like he can move in and 2 actions to get there. 1 to bite, put 2 damage on it. Mark kills the Wizard of the Order, walks in and finishes off the cultist.
Yeah.
Alternatively, if they don't see themselves, like if they really want to get the cultist, so it's not a great answer because they don't get any of the doom off anything, but like Ash Kempe could just walk in and hold the cultist.
Yep.
Hold the Wizard of the Order, assuming he fails the test, of course.
Yeah. I mean, he could also like let's say the one that spawns on like. Going into the deeper knowledge of the game, the one that spawns on the north side cares about resources. The one that spawns at St. Mary's Hospital cares about evading, right? Like, he could also move in there and, like, start building a plan as well, just in case, like, Mark then kills his Wizard of the Order and you guys have a backup plan just in case, too. Like, he doesn't even need to necessarily bite it, right? Like, he could just move in and start preparing for it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Well... At the very least, I'm kind of on that plan that if Mark just deals with the wizard, Rex goes first, we see what spawns, Mark kills his wizard, it's probably then best in that case, unless Duke can go and start to deal with the cultist, he just goes and cleans up the Acolyte.
Yeah, you just get a whole nother turn out of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Plus one of your new empty locations, because the Acolyte must spawn in an empty location, is one that's very easy for actually anyone to get to.
Yeah, definitely.
In case you need to do that.
Yeah, like the only real downside I see is sending Duke to deal with the Acolyte on the side is that's like a real isolated location.
Yeah.
And so even if you spawn the cultist, and if Mark draws another enemy, like a Night Gaunt or something in this scenario, then you're probably not getting the cultist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but Pete's also like pretty soft at dealing with pretty much any of the cultists in the game.
Yeah.
Like the ones that we know are remaining, even if we didn't know which ones they are, he's kind of not great at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess he could still like just move over 2 spaces and grab the Night Gaunt from Mark if that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even just like move in, bite the cultist, and move back.
Yeah.
Assuming success.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, one thing we should also say, all of this is assuming you draw well, right? Like, you could just draw the red token and be like, well, what can you do, right?
Yeah, if you fail all your tests, you fail all your tests. That's just how it is.
And this here is also why this game is so exciting, is because this is just something that Travis and I made as an example for a board state, and there's so many different ways you can take it to try to get ahead.
Yeah, there's even I was joking when I said everyone could resign, but if Rex fails his first 2 tests...
Yeah, you probably just...
Maybe that's what you want to do.
Yeah, you probably
just want to get out.
Yeah. Because you won't have enough time otherwise.
Yeah.
Unless things go, like, really well. Like, perfectly well.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Sick, any other thoughts, or should we close this video up?
No, I think I'm done with it anyway.
Yeah, and I think as well, just one last little bit to close this out. Evaluation is very hard, and you're always improving in this game. Like, we're also, like, even though we play this game a lot, we're still learning and getting better with each scenario we play, because the game is fun because it's difficult, right? It's fun that because it makes you make hard decisions. So if you look at something like this and you're like, man, this is hard, I don't know what to do, just break it down into the smaller pieces. And with any board state in the game, if you feel overwhelmed, just break it down into small little bites, and it'll be a lot easier for you to swallow, I guess is the phrase, right?
one last point to make about this before we close it off is we talk about trying to make the most optimal decision throughout this video. It's very possible to do things the best possible way and still lose
Oh yeah.
playing this game. Even if you have like the perfect, like highest percentage line all planned out, and you just draw the auto fail 3 times in a row, like it can happen.
It can, yeah.
And you lose anyway.
Yeah.
It's part of what makes the game exciting, and you shouldn't feel discouraged by it.
Yeah. You can definitely yell and scream in the moment, but then you're just like, man, I guess Arkham Horror just hates me today, but, you know, it's still a blast.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so hopefully this has helped you better understand evaluating the game of Arkham Horror. What other topics do you want us to cover on this series? Let us know in the comments. We have a bunch in the bag. We have that one as well. Someone suggested understanding like multiplayer and the roles that exist in the game. That's like, it's all there, and we appreciate the comments. We dig the comments. So keep them coming. Thanks for watching. As you can see, do what Duke does, and if you have not liked and subscribed, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. We make a bunch of Arkham Horror content, and we have a good time doing it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one, and as always, GG's.